welcome to Japan Expert Insights and our Japanese Politics 101 room. Every Sunday, Timothy Langley, Chief Executive Officer of Langley Esquire, a Tokyo-based public affairs consultancy, and host Maya Matsuoka bring to you the latest developments in Japanese politics. In this podcast, we welcome comments, questions, and opinions, so if you haven't done so yet, join us next time. In the meantime, you can find us at japanexpertinsights.com and our YouTube channel, where we upload all the conversations on Japanese politics, business insights, and the Japan's role in the Indo-Pacific region.
You know, it feels like so much time has passed since the last time we met. When we met this time last week, Fumio Kishida had been appointed as the president of the LDP, and the following day, Monday, he was elected as prime minister. He quickly announced his cabinet, about 20 individuals, 3 of them women. Not bad. I mean, in terms of, distribution, male and female, Japan has typically been behind the curve on representation of the female part of society in Japanese politics in general. So 3 is not bad. It's a little bit better than it was in the last administration. And he announced, he had a couple of press conferences about what his administration would look like, what it would represent. And I'd like to get into that a little bit. And importantly, I'd like to talk about the elections that are looming, the choice of the date for the election, which was announced, and some of the dynamics that are going on there. Fumio Kishida is now the prime minister. He took office a week ago tomorrow, and he appointed a cabinet. So one of the things that we're always concerned with, during the LDP election, who's going to be the LDP president? Is it going to be Kishida? Is it going to be Kono Taro? Is it right? That kind of dynamic that was going on there. It becomes a little bit more revealed to us when it's all said and done. He becomes prime minister. He starts distributing the spoils of becoming prime minister. And I think what we see, what we realize, what is confirmed to us is that he became prime minister because, gosh, guys, I really want to become prime minister. Whatever it takes, I'll become prime minister. And it really appears to be pretty much a continuation of what we had before. That's, well, not a continuation, because there were winners and losers. Mr. Nikai clearly was a loser. Kono was a loser. There were a couple of people that fared out pretty well. I think it can be said that Mr. Aso came out on top. I think he probably was the biggest winner, but Abe did really well, and also Mr. Amari. So the 3 A's, as has been talked about a lot on this dynamic between Nikai and the opposition, which was represented by the triumvirate. So the examination of who became cabinet ministers and who stayed and who are new reveals an awful lot. Factional politics did not operate the way that we thought it would, which means that the factions promoted someone within their faction, typically the faction leader, as the standard bearer and as the candidate. And then the cabinet posts, after all is said and done, are distributed according to factional strength. The second part of that is that the cabinet distribution according to factional strength was somewhat followed, but the election of the prime minister was not. That went on to a new level, pretty much dictated by the forces of the younger members of the parliament. That's those members who are 3 terms or fewer, who are in the Diet. Those are the ones who are, gosh, it's kind of Yeah, they're a little bit more at risk. Once you've had four elections under your belt, or five, you pretty much are an established figure. You're given a couple of important posts so that when you go to your constituency, you can tell them what you're representing, and you're developing a specialization and a broader band of confidence and respectability within the LDP and also within your constituency. Those who are three or less, and they comprise almost 35% of the entire diet population. So they're significant, and their voice to to be heard by the standard bearers and the older fellows had to be listened to. They had to be followed. And so you had this Koizumi and Kono on one side, and then you had the other faction, which was led by Tatsuo Fukuda in the Hosoda faction, a younger fellow, three-term member of the Diet. You had that battle going on there. The Kono faction, younger faction, lost out. He received not even a ministerial portfolio, but kind of a party post, one of his first party posts, actually, to be the PR spokesperson for the LDP. Not bad shakes, but for somebody who's been a minister four times, it is a bit of a setback. Koizumi will be in the background a little bit more. But on the other hand, you've got from the Hosoda faction, Mr. Fukuda, even though he's a three-termer, got a very relevant party post, actually a little bit beyond probably what his capabilities are. So much is left to be seen there. But what you see is the Kishida administration building up, hopefully to project to the population consistency and credibility and a commitment to the pronouncements of the prime minister, which we only heard in loose terms during the campaign, but it was great because for the LDP, everybody was talking about the LDP. They weren't talking about the opposition. Now to put meat to the bones, Mr. Kishida as prime minister, he's made his own statements about what he wants to do with economic security, what his view is with regard to Taiwan and the straits, his relationship with the United States, with Quad, and that sort of thing. So I think it can be said pretty clearly that what is going to be said by Kishida and by this administration is specifically and directly for the purposes of the election. And he called for the election. He said, there were two scenarios for having an election, and he jumped it and accelerated it so that the election starts in actually 4 days. In 4 days, this week, we always say this in this room, stay tuned because this week is going to be different than next week. Next week there's so much happening. And in fact, it turns out to be pretty accurate. Every week that we gather, there's new information, there's significantly new movement. And you got to stay tuned and you got to stay on top of it because it's all pretty important. I mean, we try and focus on only that stuff that's important to you, that has an impact on, running a business or being a resident, a foreign resident, or a contributor to the Japanese economy here. So we get lost sometimes in the woods from the technical stuff. We try to avoid that, but to the degree we can, make accurate statements without too much speculation. It can be said that with the election right on top of us now, next 4 days, there will be pronouncements made, particularly with Mr. Kishida's view towards a new economic mandate, a new kind of, it's not the three arrows, although he can't distance himself too much from the three arrows. He said, it is kind of like the three arrows, except for the economic disparities that it has created and for the shrinking middle class. I want to bolster that. When he says that, he means bring more people who are not in the middle class up. It doesn't really mean enriching those people who are already occupying the middle class. But the idea here is, like when Mr. Suga became prime minister, he immediately lowered the prices of cell phone charges, which generated great appreciation and admiration for him, because that had a huge economic impact, interestingly enough. Mr. Kishida is looking for the same thing. So he's coming up, he's going to talk about a huge economic stimulus package. He's going to talk about technology and moving to AI and 6G and the network, and making Japan a real contender, as the United States and China are also competing in various fields to to exert their dominance. Japan has a role in that. It is segmenting out those areas where it can be successful. One of those is in chips. One of those is in AI. He's also said that he wants to do a little bit of reconfiguration for the defense spending, for offensive capabilities. So there's a lot going on there. This will all stop once the election happens, and the election will be on the last day of this month. That's pretty important to keep in mind too. So as we move forward, the next time we meet, there will already have been like 4 days of election campaigning. You'll probably hear loudspeakers in the background as my microphone is on, and as people come up to the room, you might be hearing that too. It's going to be a hotly contested election, and what's at stake here is the LDP maintaining with Komeito something approaching a supermajority, which is 2/3, which they kind of are just grasping right now. It is possible that they will lose that more, but not to a degree that they lose a majority of the lower house. They could, though, and if they do lose that, we can talk about that. That's a lot of speculative talk, but it's interesting to talk about that. What would happen if the LDP loses a significant amount of votes, and as a consequence, Mr. Kishida's leadership is called into question? It's not out of the it's not out of the unexpected to say that, because in elections, Mr. Kishida has been famously unsuccessful, as we watched in the various by-elections. So it remains to be seen. When it comes to generating excitement and inspiration, he's not that kind of a leader. He's mild. He's not that forceful when it comes to positions on policy and pushing the envelope. He's more of a moderate. He's middle of the road. He is very strong on this the disparity, economic disparity. He's strong on making the COVID, the response to COVID, avoiding the mistakes of the previous administrations. He said that several times without attempting to be or sounding too critical. He wants to set up a new ministry on economic security. He's taking a page off of Mr. Suga, who set up the digital agency, which was very well regarded, highly successful, launched at lightning speed, one of the hallmarks of the Suga administration, in fact. So he's looking for those kind of key points. Unfortunately for Mr. Kishida, the expectations and the approval rating of his administration are pretty low. Of the last 9 administrations, including Mr. Abe's administrations, Mr. Kishida's are probably the second lowest. The first lowest, I believe, was Mr. Taro Aso. He became prime minister very briefly and lost out. It's not a good sign for longevity for Kishida that his approval ratings are starting out so low. Maybe this is a reflection of the infighting, the LDP infighting, but it's something that needs to be turned around, because in the elections, Mr. Suga didn't have to deal with this when he became prime minister. He didn't have to deal with this onslaught of elections coming right down the path to define whether you're a good prime minister or not, even before you have a chance. If the LDP does poorly under Mr. Kishida's leadership, then it calls into question not only the makeup of the cabinet as it currently stands, and there are already questions going on about the stability there, but also about Mr. Kishida overall. It's Japan is a parliamentary democracy, so the prime minister can be removed with a vote of no confidence, or under the prime minister's own volition, he can dissolve the parliament and go up for another election. I think that would probably be pretty ill-advised, given COVID, given the economy, given the geopolitical situation of Japan. But we've seen stranger things. The elections will be a bellwether for him. And one of the things that the public is looking at now is the appointment of Amari as Secretary General, replacing Nikai. So we talked earlier about the triumvirate Abe, Aso, and Amari. Amari is very powerful. He's a considered politician. He's highly regarded. He's very good at what he does, and he lobbied for and got the #1 LDP post as Secretary General. That's good for him, but it does generate a lot of scrutiny among his enemies, and it brings up vestiges of his moral character because of bribery scandals that he was involved in earlier in his career, not in the too far distant past, and not far enough away to completely forget. A lot of people want to just gloss over that, but that could be a real thorn for Mr. Kishida. It is possible that it could be so much that Mr. Amari needs to resign and take a back seat. That, I think, would be disastrous as a signal in front of the elections. But it's building, and it will build on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. You might see some changes there. The other kind of dynamic that we have going here is that Nikai is, I guess, characterized as one of the losers in the LDP race. And as Secretary General, he was in charge of defining who gets to run in what districts and how much money these candidates get. And one of the rubs that was a cause of friction between Nikai and Aso, and also Abe and other individuals, is Nikai is the faction leader for his faction. And he had some candidates that were running in a single seat district who were also being challenged by members of other factions who also wanted the LDP to support them. But since they were in Nikai's faction, and since he was the Secretary General, he was giving preference, blatant preference, to these individuals, also to individuals who might have been independents, but in the hope that they would join his faction should they be elected. So there are a couple of tough races that were already on the books, even while Mr. Suga was prime minister, that were contentious. And now with Amari in the catbird seat on defining this, these fights are becoming very, very obvious. So candidates will be chosen that by Mr. Amari, who were selected by Mr. Nikai with expectations, even funding, in preparation for the elections that will be shaken up. So there's a lot of animosity, and this is all occurring within the tent that we call the LDP. There are two bellwethers before we go into election at the last day of this month. There are two by-elections. I think they will be on the 24th. They'll be next Sunday for two seats that will somewhat indicate LDP preference, candidate distributions, and that sort of thing. There's something to watch. It's probably not too useful to go into the details of it because it gets a little bit thick, but if it comes up in the question and answer period, maybe we can get to it. I know Michael is pretty deep into the dynamics here. But the point is that there are fights that are occurring now, even within the LDP, that could spill over into just, pissing off the electorate. They say that if on election day, less than 52% of the people show up for a vote, the LDP is not going to do very well. So if it's raining, if for some reason there's a statement or the prime minister says something, there's some dynamic and people just say, gosh, I'm not sure. I just don't know. I think I'd rather stay home and watch TV rather than going to the nearby school gymnasium to cast my vote. It could be that the LDP does extremely poorly. So a lot is riding on this. A lot is going to be determined by how many people show up. And the reason for that dynamic is because usually the opposition, they're very dedicated and committed to their issues. They're fighting against the giants. So they usually show up pretty consistently, especially Komeito is a good vote getter, and people who belong to that political party, they're fairly regimented when it comes to elections, not as much as the LDP. So that is a dynamic that you keep in mind when voting day comes. The temperature, the weather, what statements have been made over the last couple of days, and it will become a real frenzy, especially the 3 days beforehand, because at that point, the people who are looking at the numbers, they're talking to people, they're analyzing it. They're going to know that they're on the line, and therefore the prime minister will be out more. He'll have more microphones dangling in his hands. It will become a little bit more frantic, and the opposition parties, they're watching this too. They've got their voice that they want to pursue. They want to get elected. So there's plenty going on that side, and I don't know if it's useful. Maybe getting too much into the weeds, but it might be just to touch on how actually people get elected into the lower house. I think I should touch on that, and maybe Michael, you can weigh in too. But of the two houses, the lower house is considered to be the more populated one. There are 476 members of the lower house. They're considered to be the most powerful because on budget decisions and on contentious issues, if a vote is held by the lower house and a different decision is made in the upper house, it goes back down to the lower house for a vote, and that vote holds sway. So it has certain powers that eclipse that of the upper house. The upper house is smaller. It has 245, 246 members. So numbers count. There are 289 single-member districts in Japan. And so the parties focus on these single seats. They focus on putting their best foot forward for the individual candidate there. And that's where the Nikkei controversy comes in, because different factions within the LDP might have a vested interest. I mean, that's what they're competing on, the vested interest that they have in those single seat constituencies. So when the voter goes in to make a vote, he's given a ballot. He's supposed to write a person's name on it in the single seat district. And he's given a second ballot, which is for proportional representation if it's a multi-seat district. So there are 176 seats that are for a proportional representation. So sometimes the interesting feature of this is this proportional representation is a list of candidates that's collected by the various political parties. So the LDP has a party of a list, and depending on how many votes they get, for example, the LDP gets 30% of the votes in the proportional side, probably 30% of the seats, the 176 seats, kind of will be distributed to the LDP because that's what they want. In the upper house, it's a little bit more specific, but in the lower house, it's there are other calculations, but it's about, if they win 30%, they're going to get about 30% of those seats. So the interesting thing here is that a person can run for one of the single seat constituencies, but also have his name on the list. So he might lose because of another candidate is more popular, but he could win a lower house seat because he's on the list and his political party did well and his name was high enough up. I hope that's not too deep in the woods, but you will hear more about this as the election becomes closer because of how people are actually voted for and what that distribution is. And the candidates, are they kind of considered a zombie candidate because they didn't win the last election, but they were on the list and they only won because of the list? That means they won via strength of the political party, not so much because of their personality. We can get into that a little bit more if you wish to. Maybe we'll talk about it a little bit more this time next week, depending on the interest that's here. But with that, I've gone on for about 30 minutes. I'd like to open it up, and I invite others in the room who have something to say, something to add, some critique on what I've said to lodge that. So, Maya?
Yes, thank you, Timothy. I'm trying to get Michael join us. I don't know why it doesn't work, so if you can do that, please do it. In the meantime, I have a question to you. So,
Sure.
well, Mr. Kishida, he has come up as a person, and a politician, or let's say a prime minister who is trying to appeal to both the audiences. I mean, the younger and the elder audiences here in Japan, and of course his fellow politicians as well. So he has pledged to bring, let's say a mixture of changes and new things, and also to continue some of the policies which have been in place for a while. And my question to you is, what is the influence of his policies on the election of the lower house? I mean, because you said that, we can expect changes there. There is a possibility for LDP to lose the 2/3 majority
Yes.
there. So what are the prospects? I mean, because obviously Mr. Kishida is trying to appeal to both, generations, or let's say electorates. But I just wonder, what your take on this is.
Yeah, at this point, it's pretty speculative. He's bringing in the younger members, the third termers or earlier, because he wanted to become prime minister. So becoming prime minister is going to be different than winning the election. But he made the distribution of his cabinet and the party posts. Actually, I think it's accurate to say it's not his selection. It's, other people are making these decisions for him. He wanted to be prime minister. He got what he wanted, but he wasn't the one that was really dictating and pulling all the strings there. Good morning, Michael.
Oh, good morning. Good morning,
Did you
Mario.
hear? Did you hear Maya's question?
That how the policy choices that Kishida has thrown out are going to affect the election.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah. Um, I'll riff on that for a second if you want.
Oh,
Sure.
please do.
Sure.
Yes.
Okay. Well, basically, at least the most important thing that every public opinion poll asks about is the economy. That if in every public opinion poll they ask the voters what is it that the prime minister should concentrate on, and inevitably, no matter what the conditions are, whether the economy is growing, shrinking, whatever, they say the economy. Okay, so he throws out his idea that sounds remarkably like the three arrows of Abe Shinzo, the first three arrows. But he adds a little hook to it, saying that this time we're going to make sure that people's basic salaries go up. When the corporations make money, that some of that gets to the people. Now,
Right.
the reason
And the
why
stock
he's doing that
of
is
that
for
didn't it?
electoral purposes. Hello?
Sorry, I just interrupted you, and I said the stock market sure loved that, didn't it?
Yeah, it didn't at all. It did not like that. The reason why he did that is because the main message, number one message from the main opposition party, the Constitutional Democratic Party of Japan, the CDPJ, is precisely that Abenomics, the three arrows of Abe Shinzo, did not deliver a higher base pay to most workers, or at least not in any way proportional or commensurate with the amount of profit that Japan's corporations made over the time span.
Right.
What Kishida is doing is not imitating, but being very close in his orientation in terms of economic and taxation policy to what the CDPJ is offering as its idea. And that's something that successful Japanese LDP prime ministers have done in the past, such as Koizumi basically borrowed his entire economic plan from the then Democratic Party of Japan opposition DPJ.
Mm.
So will that work? Is that important? I don't think either party really knows whether people make their votes based upon that promise, because it hasn't been kept in the past. It's not a promise that's easy to deliver. How do you pry out of the cold, dark hands of the financiers and of the accounting department the profits that were gained? It's very difficult. You might possibly tax earnings, but boy, there are just all kinds of companies that will just run out of Japan if that kind of language gets talked about. So, how do you make companies? How do you force them to give their profits to their workers and also a bit to the shareholders too? No prime minister, no administration has ever discovered a way of doing that.
Yeah, there was a report from a senior finance ministry bureaucrat about, this is the Titanic headed towards the iceberg, and the prime minister saying these kinds of things is really irresponsible. Kind of interesting coming out of a bureaucracy, but yeah, I think that this is all geared towards, let's say anything that we want to, and the election's going to be so quick that they can't fact check it, so that at least we win. We don't lose our with our coalition partner, and we don't lose a super majority, and we get a little bit more. We're in a honeymoon period, even though the poll numbers don't look very good. Say whatever you can. Let's just get through this election.
Right. Thank you for that. And my next question is about, once again, the digital agency, because there were a lot of hopes, expectations, a lot of anticipation as it comes, to digitalization. And everybody knows that, the country and the government do need to digitalize so that things go smoothly. And, basically, Japan gets to the level of other developed countries, at least digitally. But my question is, so basically with the new government that has been appointed, the new cabinet, so we have seen that there is a new minister to the digital agency too. And so the new minister was appointed, of course, by Mr. Kishida. And Mr. Kishida has another priority as well now about economic security, cybersecurity, and so on. And also, as Mr. Suga departed, he left the office. Obviously, the person who was the most influential person in charge of the digital agency has gone. Does it mean that the digital agency will see some difficult times now in establishing its, let's say its
It's mandate.
mandate? Yes.
Yeah. I was a little bit disappointed in the selection as well. The departure of the former minister, it was expected, and in fact, he's got a tough race coming up in the lower house. It could be that even as a former minister, he could lose his seat in the upcoming election. So it was great that they started with him. He is something of a technocrat and a good friend of Mr. Suga, so that was good. And we were successful in launching the digital agency. It's something that Mr. Suga believed in kind of integrating the entire system of government and unitizing it under a digital rubric. I hope that it's not taking a less serious position within the energies of the administration. It's a big deal. It's under any circumstances, whoever is at charge is going to have difficulty. None of the ministries want to relinquish, their information or their protocols or their encryption to a central board, which is essentially what's going to happen. So it's going to be a couple of years before this transpires. But you're right. It could falter. There are lots of things that have experienced that. They come up with a flash and nothing really happens. So that's my 2 cents on it. Much remains to be seen, and it is likely that there could be other departures or reappointments after the election. So we just hold our breath and hope for the best. That's my 2 cents. If anybody else has any other insight on that.
Yeah, well, looks like your 2 cents should suffice at this time.
Thank you.
Thank you for the answer. Tomoko-san, good morning.
Morning. I have 2 questions actually. One is about the appointment of the member of the important position for the party as well as being the cabinet member. Because already the mass media and we already know that there is a couple of some or several members are having or seemingly involved with the some kind of scandals, and the appointment usually based on after the finishing of the background check, thorough background check, and this time Mr. Kishida didn't seem to care about doing a background check. In Japanese, we say shintai kensa. So I'm wondering, it's just because it's just they are anyway a temporary position people. because the election is coming anyway. That's my first question. And the second question is that Mr. Kishida already mentioned even before he became the prime minister that Mr. Nikai will have to be let go because of his age and so on and so on. And also too many times he's done. But at the same time, LDP and people know that his strong connection and network with China, and partly because of his ability to speak Chinese. And also, anyway, he has got extremely good connection with China, and he was the go-between between China and Chinese government and Japanese government. And by letting him go means, does it mean that Japan may take rather stronger action against China, although the Xi Jinping already discussed with Mr. Kishida that we need to be good friends. But those are my two questions. I've been wondering.
Okay, thanks. Let me throw in my 2 cents and see if anybody has additional value to add there. With regard to the background checks, it's Japanese politics. So, of course, there's going to be things that happen as you go through your career as a politician. Sometimes it's unavoidable that when somebody visits you and asks you a favor and they give you the box of cookies, that an envelope is inserted there. That kind of thing happens. Even Mr. Kono, as careful as he is, was implicated in some sort of graft. It surfaced a little bit before the election of prime minister. It's not a big deal. With Amari, everybody knows the story. Everybody knows the background. And I think probably the conclusion is, you're right, and you said it. They just don't care. They can do whatever they want to do, and members of the electorate who they all know this stuff. Everybody's reading and following the background there. Sometimes power is more important than that kind of history. He's a powerful person, so I'm going to vote for him because he's going to be able to bring home the bacon and build the bridge and that sort of thing. When you take a look at the continuing influence of Abe Aso as the new administration starts, Kishida had very little input into the cabinet. I don't think anybody in his faction received a cabinet portfolio, but Abe sure did, and Aso sure did. And not only that, but the defense minister stayed. The Minister of Foreign Affairs stayed, and you could make an argument that the Ministry of Finance individual stayed. And what I mean by that is Mr. Aso gave it up. He turned over his position as Minister of Finance, but he gave it to his brother-in-law. That is very powerful, and it's kind of like, in your face, and, so what? It appears to me that they can do that. It suggests an aristocracy of Japanese politics that we already kind of have indications of in terms of lineage and generational office holding. That's also, happening quite a bit with the bureaucracy too. But I think with regard to your first question, they all know this, and they're going to do it anyway. And the second part of your question was about Nikai. With Nikai now in the the back seat, he's not completely removed, but he has been lowered a couple of ranks. But I do think that it suggests that yes, China, the posture of Japan with regard to China will change as a consequence of that, because an individual who is so historically friendly with China being out of that leadership combination. And the LDP, those 4 top posts within the LDP, the LDP is such a big tent, so many different factions. It really coalesces in the Jiminto, in the LDP headquarters. So these 4 positions that were announced, and there are many, many more, but those are the 4 key ones that were distributed as a consequence of the election. It's extremely powerful with regard to policy and with regard to Japan's response to lots of issues, not just Taiwan and Korea and Hong Kong and China, that sort of thing, but defense and the economy too. Michael, I know we've talked about this issue on a bunch of different occasions. If you have any insight, love to hear them. Or maybe even Hayato.
Yeah, I can say something about the Nishida back channel to China issue. As everything, there are multiple back channels that are established, and Nikai may have played his role too obviously and too much. I'm the guy who goes to Shanghai. I'm the guy who goes to Beijing. But that he's not the only person. And certainly there is the traditional back channel of the Komeito. And Yamaguchi Natsuo does meet with Chinese leaders on a regular basis, not perhaps as regularly and as often as Nikai did. But if Kishida needs to get a letter into the hands of Xi Jinping, he can just give it to Yamaguchi Natsuo of the Komeito. In terms of the checking up, I do feel that it's necessary to speak well, or at least in support of Amari Akira, the new Secretary General. I have perhaps a somewhat odd view in that I don't think there's any scandal. And that what happened in 2016 January was a misreading of a situation by the police, and they moved too quickly before they had ascertained what had taken place. And Amari was forced out quite visibly from his position where he was the point man on the TPP, and was seen as very close to the prime minister. And he was forced, because of this investigation being carried out by the police into claims of bribery by an individual, he was forced to take a leave. He then, of course, had his own personal difficulty, which was his successful, but at a time life-threatening bout with tongue cancer. So he's come back, and he really deserves to be given a chance, because he is a very capable individual, and as far as I can tell, he's not a crook.
Yeah, agreed. And that was the main explanation. Yamaguchi from the Komeito actually said that too. Look, he hasn't been charged. The prosecutors haven't drawn papers, so therefore, let's move on. What's the next issue?
Right. Thank you for that. Tomoko-san, I hope that this answered your questions.
Well, it's not only Amari's issue, but several members of the cabinet are also seems to be having some kind of issues. So of course, Amari is the one. The other, I can't remember his name, but he one person is really talked about stealing panties from somebody's house and so on. So I can't stop laughing.
And what's wrong with that?
I mean, if you are stealing your wife's panty, that's okay. But if he's stealing from somebody's house, it's wrong.
Right. Well, but obviously there has been a lot of attention, paid to well, the members
Hi,
of
hi.
the
Can I add some point here?
Yes, Hayato, okay,
Yeah,
please go
yeah.
ahead.
So I mean, actually, like, there's no issue at all. This is the way it is. I don't know. I'm trying to remember. It's like
Yeah.
must be 30 years ago. I have a dinner with the chief secretary of the, Shintaro Abe, who is the father of, Shinzo Abe, right? And at the time, he was, for foreign minister who came to the United States to represent, this treaty, the Japan-U.S. So he said very bluntly that he had a political secretary working, for under him, 250 in Tokyo and 250 in the Yamaguchi prefecture where the election district is. So they have to pay, the salary and the expenses of the 500 political secretaries, and they have to manage every day. So for that, he's going to need the money, And that's the reality of the fact, right? Yeah. So otherwise, he cannot maintain being a politician at all. I mean, it's called like a normal business practice, Yeah. So for that also, I was involved in trying to help those guys, raise those political donations, $20-30 million, from the Soka Gakkai, in those days. Yeah, but that's the way it is. There's no issue. Why not, right? I'm done talking.
Right, if it is accepted as a general rule, then there shouldn't be an issue indeed. Well, thank you for that, Hayato. And Claude, good morning. Oh, Michael, sorry, Claude. Could you please just give us a few seconds, Michael?
Yeah, I do want to say about the Amari scandal. This is the deal, and the reason why it's never been discussed in the Diet is because it's too funny, it's too hilarious, and it would actually make the press look bad. The deal was that a construction company president wanted to bribe the Amari Akira, and the political secretary received the request, this request to bribe the Amari from this guy, and told him, "Oh, you want to make a 5 million yen? Let me get this straight. You want to make an illegal 5 million yen donation to our camp?" And he said, "Yeah." And so the political secretary, I don't know his name, but he's one of the great geniuses of Japanese politics, clearly, told this would-be briber to meet him outside of the offices of Amari in Kanagawa Prefecture. And there outside the offices, he accepted the 5 million yen, and the briber waited for the favor that he was going to get in return. He didn't get that favor, which was, in this case, special treatment by the government-directed redevelopment agency UR. When UR never called him, and it seemed that Amari didn't deliver, that's when this would-be briber went to the police and confessed to committing bribery.
I got cheated.
I got a real genius in the criminal world. I'm going to get the police to get my bribe back. Yeah, a real genius. Anyway, this genius, this construction person, went and told his story and said, "I gave 5 million yen to the political secretary of Amari Akira." That's where the scandal supposedly was. But what the truth is that Amari Akira's secretary took that money and put it in his own bank account and accepted it as a personal gift and spent the money on himself alone very carefully so that none of it had anything to do with the Amari campaign or the Amari office. And he told police, "I've spent the money on myself. It was a very nice gift from that man. I have no idea why he gave me 5 million yen, but it was very nice of him." And the police found there was no crime. There had been no money for favors. First of all, there were no favors, and the money never touched Amari or his campaign offices or his political offices. And that's why no one was charged. The political secretary cheated a crook. And well, that's what, that guy deserved it. And that is why you've never heard about it in the Diet, because if you told that story, people would be laughing.
Right. Yes, but that whole story doesn't come as a whole story in the press. So the press basically chews it up and manipulates it and gives only parts of it, so that it looks like basically there is a problem with Amari. And I guess that's what the press does best, actually. But
Yeah.
yes, but it
Yeah.
happens time and time again. And so also, of course, sometimes the press has that, they do get it right, when they reveal scandals and so on. So I guess that Tomoku-san, she was talking about other scandals, the ones in Hiroshima, I think, a couple of years ago.
Yep.
Yes. So, of course, I cannot talk about that. I don't know the whole story there either. But the point is that, yes, sometimes... even when they don't get the things right, I mean, the press, even stories which have been made up by them look quite credible. And, well, that's how things are, unfortunately. Right. Okay. And so, Claude, I'm sorry for keeping you waiting. Are you still there? Yes. Okay.
I am. Good morning, Maya. Good morning, Timothy. I had two questions, but very short. The first one is the Kishida Prime Minister created the Economic Security Portfolio, and apparently it's a little bit going into the Abe direction. Basically, out of economic reason, they could somewhere keep the Taiwan Strait free. Do you have some opinion regarding that?
So I think Mr. Kishida is attempting to put his best foot forward. He has a good solid background, like Suga had a good solid background in telecommunications, and so he came out really quickly. Let's lower the price of telephone charges, because he knows that industry well, and he knows where there's a little bit of squishiness and where he can gain some ground. Similarly, with Mr. Kishida, he created this policy of creating a strategic headquarters on the new international order, which is what he titled it, when he was chair of the LDP's Policy Research Council. And so now he's taking that. It's been in effect for a couple of years, and now he wants to make that something of a more bolder plan. The economic security, I think the first word throws some people off, because they think it conflates with the finance ministry and that sort of thing. But it's a little bit different than that. He wants to secure strategic autonomy, and to maintain, strengthen, and acquire strategic indispensability. So it's focused on other things. It's focused on a couple of key industries, which are like energy or information telecommunications, transportation, finance, and these are all dealing with, for example, cybersecurity, encryption, that sort of thing. So it bleeds a little bit into the new digital agency, a tiny bit, and it bleeds into the Ministry of Finance's purview. But there are a couple of things that are already clear about what this is supposed to mean. And it's stable and efficient supply of electricity, that sort of thing. Relocation of internet relay points for 5G, for 6G, strengthening infrastructure, business continuity plans. He complains about, the previous administrations were not really set up for crisis management. And the reason why we got caught with our pants down on COVID is because, strangely enough, Japan is not well equipped on crisis management. He wanted to deal with that. And finally, strengthening research and development capacity for vaccines and therapeutics. So he's got an emphasis on that. So Yeah, I hope that explains it a little bit. It's a bit confusing because it's his focus is on economic security, but it's more the emphasis is on the security component of that. And I think um, highly related to that is cybersecurity, infrastructure, the bandwidth, and securing, geopolitical security, which is, preventing hacking, preventing, encroaching on Japan's supply chain, that sort of thing. I hope that's somewhat clear, Claude.
Yeah, thank you. And a last question, very short, regarding the elections. Do you think that the power of the associations like the fisheries, the farmers, the truckers, and they're mostly, for the majority, they're always voting for LDP. Do you think this is still very strong, or is that losing a little bit terrain?
I personally think it's pretty much, what this is. Let's keep the ship going. So there might be some vacillation, but it's not expected to be large. If it had been Konotaro, there was an anticipation of more vacillation. The date might have been pushed off a little bit more to educate the population about what his vision was. Uh, right now, I mean, this election date was moved up by 2 weeks. So it's right on top of us. And there was a reason for that. Let's do it while we have the honeymoon. Let's say a lot of nice things so that people can't really fact check them. Let's continue with what we have. We have almost a supermajority with our Komeito partners. So let's at least maintain that. So I think that's what the gamble is. So you can anticipate that, yeah, the farmers, the fisheries, the forest. It's funny. This country is so interesting. Japan. About 65% of the entire population is within the Kanto Plain and within Osaka. The rest of the population is spread out throughout the entire archipelago. So there's not a lot of core centers of population. So people want stability, especially after, COVID and the economy suffering as it is. They're looking for that kind of stability and that kind of leadership. His best bet, as Michael said, it looks like the three arrows. Let's go with what you're comfortable with, but we're going to tune it up a little bit, toss a little bit of Tabasco on a couple of issues that appeal to the voters, and let's hope for the best. Once we come back, then let's tell everybody that we have a mandate. We have a mandate for spending trillions of yen that we don't have to make sure that the middle class can grow and spend more money and rejigger the economy. I think that's pretty close to the strategy.
Okay, thank you, Timothy.
Oh, hi. Can I add up about the security part there?
Yes, please.
Oh, okay, sure. So there's a whole economic security or whatever security big discussion started when we learned that the line has been securing, the data storage in China, which become a huge problem because now China is going to know everybody, its communication. Yeah. So last 1 year, there's a huge move to build out this data center, back to Japan from China. That's part of the like a national security. So that's the meaning a big issue. Those other issues kind of came up like this economic security, the food securities, and this other financial securities after this Yahoo or Line's scandal, right? So for information, the Line's own 50/50 with the Korean entrepreneur neighbor in the Yahoo Japan, and the Yahoo Japan has the management control of the business, and the Korean neighbor is the one that put this storage into the mainland China. So I'm done talking. Thank you.
An interesting tidbit there. I don't know if it has much to do with anything, but it's always interesting to kind of point this out that Yahoo Japan occupies maybe 5 or 6 floors of a brand new building over by the old Akasaka Prince Tower. It still belongs to the Prince Group, right over by Akasaka Mitsuke. the new digital agency occupies 2 of the floors in the same building. So this combination with Yahoo Japan and Line, because it's a 50% owner, and just 3 floors above, the new digital agency, it just makes you scratch your head and wonder about the possibilities there. I just tossed that out for your enjoyment.
Yeah, and also for this, I forgot to mention this digital agency. I don't know how because this lady who is equivalent of it's called digital con, which is like a chief bureaucrat. I mean, she can email and she can do what is like a search. She can surf the internet, but nothing more, And how can she do it? I really don't know why, Then we have the minister who probably has the same list, So it's like we have this top 2 people who are totally incompetent in the digital, and how can they lead the country? There's a discussion of Joe Ito as the potential deputy position, but he was knocked down because of his scandal, right? Yeah, so that he was considered to be one of the 2 fathers on the internet in Japan, along with Dr. Murai of Keio, So then, yes, I think that Dr. Murai should be the one to be leading, because he's another father of the internet here in Japan. I'm done talking. Thank you.
Yeah, there were a lot of missed opportunities there. I was sorry to see Joey Ito passed over too. I was really excited about that prospect. But yeah, it's Japanese politics. A lot of decisions are made for reasons that are head scratching, but that's kind of the way it is. I'm hopeful that they will get their act together. That it will be an agency that receives the appropriate funding and the appropriate mandate. But it's going to be a tough cookie either way you count it. So the person that is selected by the prime minister to lead that is incredibly important. So, you just pray for the best.
Yeah. One more important addition. Like in the United States, now we have a cyber, cyber military, right? Headed by 4-star General Paul Nakasone. Right? Yeah. So like in the U.S., cyber or this kind of issue became already a military grade, like a military force. Yeah, along with this Army, Navy, the Marine, and Air Force. But over here, like the Japan is so far small, it's,
so far behind.
Yeah, so far behind and so far incapable. So I don't think Japan has really realized how serious this whole this type of situation is. Thank you. I'm done talking.
Thank you, Hayato. And well, we can move on. So, Aya, hello.
Hi, I'm sorry, I was cooking and I came in late, so somebody may already have asked the same question. Hi, Maya and Timothy. Yes, I have 2 questions for Timothy. The one is, why did Mr. Kishida chose Amari for as a secretary general? And my second question is, why didn't Mr. Kishida give the Kono Taro for the better and more important position? That's my questions.
Okay, 2 easy answers, and other people might have something to add. Mr. Kishida didn't select Mr. Amari as Secretary General. Mr. Amari selected Amari as Secretary General. And the position of Mr. Amari was such and is such that he could have been anything he wanted to be. He was that influential in getting Mr. Kishida selected. And you can bet your bottom dollar that in private discussions before that election, I'll do this for you and I will bring these guys over for you. But this is what I want out of it. And that was a nod and a grin and a slap on the back, and it was a done deal. So I think that's the answer there. I think with Mr. Kishida, he didn't have that much play in any of these cabinet selections. The second one, what was your second question? It was
why did Mr. Kishida didn't give for
why did Kono Taro get such a Yeah, a
Yeah.
slap. So he
Mhm.
got something. I think he would have rather thrown him outside the window, but he was so popular. He's worried about that. And yeah, um, if the electorate doesn't respond well to the LDP because of LDP or because of Mr. Kishida's missteps, this is going to come back potentially to haunt them, that the person of choice was not treated kindly, and that's Konotaro. So he did have to give him a bone, and I saw Konotaro after that appointment. There was a Benkyokai, a study group with his members and with Mr. Koizumi, and he was pretty stoic about it. He says, any job that you're asked to do from the party is one of honor, and of course, you do the best you can, no matter what position. So it sounds like he's going to play ball. He's now got a party position, which he never had before. I think you can anticipate he will do a good job. But people have told me, boy, what a dangerous place to put him, because he is the PR spokesman now for the LDP. But I think he'll do. I think he'll do well. I think he won't make any big mistakes or gaffes, and he's just going to bide his time. He's not out the window. I think Koizumi suffered more than Kono did, but I think Kono is still, he's still a contender. He has people that, are on the other side, but it doesn't mean that they're enemies and they hate him. Not to the degree that Ishiba had to contend with, because Ishiba, of course, kind of did what could be considered a betrayal, but that hasn't happened with Konotaro. I hope that's responsive. Anybody else?
Yes, thank you so much, Timothy. Yes, you're right. I think Mr. Koizumi got hurt because he was crying and Mr. Kono wasn't crying. So you're true. That's so true.
Right. Well, thank you, Aya. Thank you, Timothy.
I guess one point there is Mr. Kono and Koizumi, kind of organized the whole effort against Abe and Aso, right? So so for that, they paid the price of losing. Yeah.
Well, I think they complicated it because they got Ishiba involved too.
Indeed.
Ishiba came over and said, "Look, if you win, I could be Secretary General, right? So I can bring all of my members, 3 of them. How about joining me too? How come, And I think that probably wasn't a wise choice for them.
Right. Yeah, that's right. I'm done talking. Thank you.
Thank you, Hayato.
Thank you.
Before we continue with the questions, let me tell you that I'm going to close the hand, the hand permissions in about 2 minutes. So if you want to ask Timothy or anybody on stage questions or share your thoughts with them, please do it in the next 2 minutes. And also, today we've got Yuka. Yuka, good morning, good evening to you, however. So thank you very much for coming up.
Well, thank you for inviting me up. Thank you. Thank you, Maya. Thank you, Timothy, for another great insight.
Thank you, Yuka. It's always great to see you.
Thank you. So, like you guys earlier was talking about, Mr. Kishida's sort of new announced economic policy. And I'm not smart enough that if that's good for the country or not. But judging from the foreign investors' reaction, some people even coined the term Kishida shock. So I take that the particular part of his announced, economic initiatives, which is the raising capital gains taxes from 20 to 30%. I think it seems like that's the sticking point. My question is, again, I don't know enough the procedure. My question one, what is the likelihood for this policy to become an actual reality in the tax system in Japan? So, and then if these policies, the new tax law can become a reality, even if the lower house election can be a huge a roadblock for Mr. Kishida's administration? Thank you.
Great question. So already there has been leaks within the Ministry of Finance, not from the minister, but from bureaucrats within the ministry, that Mr. Kishida needs to be careful because the economy is not very stable. It's very fragile. There's, it's 200% debt ratio over GDP on an annualized basis. There's not much he can do. He wants to create wealth, but he doesn't. He's already said, I won't increase the consumption tax. So his first tool to use would be raising the consumption tax. They tried that before. They raised it from 8 to 10%. The economy took a hit. He can't afford to do that now. And in order to encourage people that he's not going to, he actually publicly stated, I'm not going to raise the consumption tax. So what other tool does he have? He's got, the corporates, the rich people, right? Kind of the same thing that's going on in the United States. We want to do a $1 trillion, $2 trillion, how many trillions you want to talk about? How are you going to pay for it? Let's get the rich people. And in Japan, what that means is, the corporates. And the corporates, even though they had the opportunity with a great economy under the Abe administration and the three arrows and loose fiscal policy, is they were making money hand over fist, but they were storehousing it inside the company. They weren't distributing it. They weren't filtering it through their companies to the workers. The people who invested in them were very happy because profits were rising. Mr. Kishida has said very clearly, this needs to be redistributed. It shouldn't be hoarded by the companies. So this is what he's saying now. And then there'll be the election that will give him something of a mandate to move on that. Yeah, let's go ahead and stick it to the companies. Let's go ahead and raise the wages of people so that we can create a more vibrant middle class. That will be somewhat decided on the election, and how he's going to pay for it. He might, indicate that. And then after the election, he needs to put those policies into place. He needs to create the laws to do that. And then he has the upper house election, in 7 months or so. So how this election comes out, if he lies, if he makes promises that he doesn't keep, he's got a very short bandwidth where the electorate are going to look at that. The corporates are going to look at that, the stock market, and they're going to say, we don't like this guy. We don't like the way this is going. And when it comes time to elect one half of the upper house, probably in July, and the LDP does poorly there, for example, goes under a majority, needing, absolutely needing Komeito, and maybe Komeito gets sick of the LDP in the interim as well. That's going to spell a real problem for this administration. So it's a really exciting time. You've got the new administration, you've got the election, you've got all these pronouncements, and then you have, in a very short period of time, half of the upper house going up for election too, as a kind of an evaluator of what happened over the last 6 or 7 months. So it's really an exciting time to watch how this folds out, how politics actually moves, how pronouncements, how the electorate actually holds politicians' feet to the fire when they make a promise and they don't fulfill them. It's a difficult dance here. He wants to create more money without, taxing, without. I mean, it's hard. How are you going to do that? Anybody else have anything to say about that?
Can I throw a quick question? Does Japan have a debt ceiling like US does? And they keep raising, but anyway, Japan doesn't, right? They don't have any law, disallowing having additional debt.
Well,
I'm sorry. This may be, a not, So kind of side question.
No, it's a good question. Consider the fact that 200% beyond what they're producing every year kind of indicates what the answer is. There is alarm. The Bank of Japan is watching that, but 200%, that's been generated over several administrations over several years. we are in the doldrums. The heydays of the bubble economy are gone. They're looking for some way to recreate that. Mr. Kishida has already said, the Reiwa explosion, I want to create that. And he thinks by redistributing wealth, spiritually, he feels this disparity between the rich and the poor, and the number of people who are considered to be poor people, or those who have fallen below the kind of poverty level, and the children and single mothers and people who have lost their jobs as a result of COVID. He spiritually is very connected to that, and I think that appeals to voters. It's just how do you get the economy to do that without being in everybody's face and turning your economy more socialist? That's what it somewhat suggests, is that the central government becomes even more powerful, takes the money and redistributes it, and fails to allow the market mechanism to actually reward those who produce good value and insight, and it's distributed just because of the numbers and keeping the population at a somewhat normalized rate. On many levels, Japan is an outlier when compared to other OECD countries. So he's got his work cut out for him.
Okay, thank you.
I have a quick question. After the general election is over, supposedly the LDP managed to win somehow a certain amount of the seats. Do you think Mr. Kishida can choose whatever he wants to be in the cabinet, like a long time ago Nakasone Yasuhiro did it?
Yeah, I think so. What frequently happens after an election campaign is the prime minister says, based on this election, I now have a mandate to, and then he just fills in his words. And whether he has a mandate or not, if it's close to what he pronounced as a campaign position, he could probably say that. But, look at politics around the world. Sometimes they don't have a mandate, but they act as if they do, because it's going to be a while before they have another election. Michael, I noticed your mic is off.
Michael?
Well, yeah, he's going to have to replace a few persons. He's probably going to have to replace Defense Minister Kishi, who is, I think, too ill to actually continue. He's there as a placeholder. He's the brother of Abe Shinzo, and the election's coming up. But when the election's gone, they're going to need someone who can be vital and engaged. Who that will be, I don't know, but I don't think Kishi will continue. He may make a few other changes, but that's the big one. Whether the rest of the cabinet is very finely chosen in terms of factional balance, in terms of sometimes in terms of competence and background, but very carefully in terms of age groups, in terms of number of times having been elected to the Diet. It's a very intricate machine right now. You can tinker with it, but there's not going to be a lot of changes.
So, in conclusion, we have a fabulous audience. I'm always impressed. So many great, Japan hands, people that are involved in the relationship, always showing up, and I can't tell you how much I appreciate that. I also very much appreciate the people showing up on the stage and sharing their insight. We have a couple of regulars. The floor is open. If you have an issue or a particular slant that is you want to delve into further, please be my guest. But this is such a great room. Maya, thank you very much. I understand that this is our 35th consecutive room together. Is that right?
It is, yes.
So, I really appreciate it. I appreciate you, Maya, in keeping the dialogue flowing so smoothly. I learn a lot from having this room with you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Timothy. I apologize for the cold showers.
Stay tuned for next week. Next week,
Yes.
We're going to be on fire. We're going to be in the middle of an election. There's going to be a couple of new revelations. Yeah, it's going to be great.
It's going to be great, yes. Thank you. Have a great day.
This was Japan Expert Insights Room on Japanese politics. Thank you for coming and staying with us today. We will be on air next Sunday at 8:30 in the morning, Japan time again, so join us. Until then, you can find us at japanexpertinsights.com and our YouTube channel, where we upload all the conversations on Japanese politics, business insights, and the role of Japan in the Indo-Pacific region. If you want to stay informed about our upcoming events, you can follow us on Clubhouse, LinkedIn, and Facebook. Again, we're looking forward to your joining us next week. Until then, stay well and enjoy every day as much as possible. See you!